Good day, everyone. This is the part 2 of the chapter 5, which is the introduction to biology. And as a recap for the part 1, we describe biology as the study of life or living things, and that biology has different branches. And in biology also, there is what we call levels of biological organization or a hierarchy of how an organism forms from a single atom, and then as the totality is what we called as the biosphere or the totality of all the ecosystems in the earth. And also we have discussed the role of microscope in the world of science, and we discusses also the parts of the microscope, that they are divided into illuminating parts, magnifying parts, and we have mechanical parts. Now, to proceed with the part 2 for the introduction to biology, we will be focusing on the cell, as again I have mentioned that the cell is the basic unit of life. Now, to proceed, let us first know who are those early scientists that introduces or proposed about cell. So we have here Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke in 1665, he coined the term cell while looking at a slice of cork and described them as a tiny boxes or honeycomb. So si Robert Hooke uses a simple microscope wherein he get a slice, nagkuha siya og slice of a cork. Cork is, for example, kanang taklob or cover of a wine bottle, wherein that cork comes from an oak tree, tapos iyahang gi-examine with his microscope, and then he observed that naay murag mga tiny boxes or murag honeycomb or balay sa buyog or bees inside that cork. So he called that tiny boxes as cell, from the Latin word cilia, which means small rooms. Next, we have Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Anton van Leeuwenhoek in 1673 used also a handmade microscope because si Anton van Leeuwenhoek was an inventor. So meaning, tigbuhat siya og mga instruments just like microscope, and then he observed pond scum and discovered single-cell organisms he called as animalcules. So ang iya hapod is nagkuha siya mga sample of water gikan sa pond, even the saliva of a human or rainwater, iyahang gi-observe using a microscope, and then naa siya mga na-discovered nga mga single-cell organisms or mga organisms nga naa dito nagpuyo sa mga sample niya. And that he called it as animalcules. Animalcules meaning small animals. And those small animals are now what we call as the microorganisms. Next, we have Matthias Cliden. Matthias Cliden was a botanist. So if we talk about botanists, from the word botany, wherein take note again, pag maingon tag botany, it is the study of the plants. So katong nag-study sa plants or botany, gitawag to sila og botanist. So si Matthias Cliden was a botanist, so meaning iyahang focus are about plants. So he concluded that all plants are made up of cells. So siya ang nag-ingon pod og nag-propose that all the plants are made up of cells. On the other hand, the fourth scientist is we have Theodore Swan. Theodore Swan was a zoologist, meaning from the word again, zoology, which is the study of animals, iyahang ginastudihan is about animals. So, ang iyaha pong na conclude or iyahang na propose is that all animals are made up of or composed of cells. Now, the last one, we have Rodolphe Virchow concluded that cells must arise from pre-existing cells, meaning a single cell or katong daghan nga cells, they came from a single cell or nagikan sila from a single cell. So we will elaborate that more later sa tuang lecture. So again, these are the early scientists that proposes the early ideas about cells. So again, we have Robert Hooke, siya ang nag-propose sa term nga cell from the Latin word cilia, which means small rooms. Anton van Leeuwenhoek, siya ang nag-discover sa mga single-celled organisms, which he called as, again, animalcules or small animals. Matthias Cliden proposes that all plants are made up of cells. On the other hand, Theodore Swan proposes that all animals are composed or made up of cells. And again, Rodolphe Virchow concluded that all cells must arise from pre-existing cells. Now, to elaborate more about cells, we have this cell theory. So this cell theory, this is the basic one because naanay mga bag-o or modern type of cell theory components. But this is the basic one. So let's start with the first one. Accordingly, all organisms are composed of one or more cells. And again, if we talk about organisms, it includes animals, plants, and those microorganisms. So all of those organisms are composed of either isa ka cell or daghan nga cell. Now my question is, kamo, are you composed of one or many cells? So we will elaborate that more as we go on to the discussions about the parts of the cell or the types of the cell. Now, second one, the cell is the basic unit of life in all living things. If you can remember in our discussions the levels of biological organization, diba we started as an atom. And atom becomes molecule. And then molecule becomes an organelle. And then organelles grouped together as one become a cell. And then after the cell, proceed dayon siya og tissues and so on. So meaning from that we can say that ang pinakasinugdanan gyud or pinaka foundation sa life is that the cell. So take note that again we are composed of cell. Take note sa number 1 that all organisms are composed of one or more cells. So that is why the cell is the foundation or the beginning of life in all living things. Third one is that all cells are produced by the division of the pre-existing cell. So these components or statement, we can reflect to the idea of Rodolphe Virchow as iyahang gi-propose again that all cells must arise from pre-existing cells. So again, these are the components of the cell theory. Now, again, what is a cell? So we know already, again, pabalik-balik na ako that cell is the basic unit of life, that we are composed of cells. Now, what is really a cell? How important a cell is? Or what is the function of the cell? What are the parts or the organelles of the cells? So let us explore. Cells are the basic structure and the fundamental unit of all organisms where constant exchange of matter with and between the cells is in the process of living. So meaning, again, the cell or cells are the beginning or the foundation or the basic unit of all the organisms. So sa cell, diraan mahitabo ang mga exchange of matter with and between the cells is the process of living. So all the processes or activities that supports life or in order for us to live or to survive is the process nga mahitabo within the cell, sulod sa cell or gawas sa cell. So that's how important a cell in our living or process of living nato. So to describe or to give you some processes that occurs or nakabase sa cell, function sa cell is one example is the basis of growth. So ang pagtubo nato or the development nato can be traced back or reflected on the function or sa trabaho sa cell. Another one is we have reproduction. So take note, in the sexual type of reproduction nato, or for example, kita human, we are reproduced by the union of the sperm cell of our father and the egg cell of our mother, right? So kato pa lang, egg cell pa lang, cell na to siya, which is a sex cells. And then we have the sperm cell for the male. So nag-unite to sila forming a zygote or the fertilized egg. Now si zygote dayon mo undergo dayon na siya og cell division. So nag-divide ang cell until na-produce ang what we called as an embryo, and then ang embryo dayon ma-develop. So from that, we can say that cells really are the basic structure or the fundamental unit. So without the union of the two cells or without the formation of the zygote, dili ta ma-form or dili ta ma-reproduce. Walay mahitabong reproduction. Another one is heredity. So heredity is in terms of inheritance or unsa ato ang mamana from our parents. So take note, ang cell naa siya mga organelles. So later ato nang i-explore in that inside, for example, in the organelle of the cell is we have this DNA or the deoxyribonucleic acid. This DNA is a large molecule that contains the genes. Ang genes are the hereditary or the traits, hereditary traits of an organism kung unsa to ang makuha. So kung mag-divide ang cell, katong mga traits nga naa sa sulod sa DNA, mapasa to siya cell to cell. Maong for example, ikaw nga anak, imuhang traits or imuhang physical appearance nimo or unsay naa sa imuha, nakuha na nimo from the traits coming from your parents. So how did you get those inheritance? So again, from the process pa lang of embryo, there is a cell division, so napasa cell to cell ang DNA from your parents, mauna nga you have your traits as the same with your parents. Another one is embryology of an organism or development of an embryo. So take note again, for 9 months we are inside the tummy of our or the womb of our mother, and by that 9 months we undergo development. So ang development ana again starts from a cell or from a division of a cell. So again, that is how important a cell is. So mao nang gitawag gid siya og basic structure in the fundamental unit. Now, in the branches of biology, we have this what we call as cytology. Cytology or the cell biology is the study of the cell structure and activity. Now, since we are discussing about cells, organisms can be divided into unicellular organisms or multicellular organisms depending on the number of cells nga naa sa ilaha. Take note in the cell theory again. The first component is that all organisms are composed of one or more cells. So naay mga organisms nga nag-composed of isa lang ka cell, and then napoy mga organisms that composes of many cells. And again, I have asked you if asa man taana, do we have only one cell or we are composed of many cells? Next. So, balik ta sa unicellular o multicellular organisms. Now, pag mingon tag unicellular, uni means one. So, the cell and the organism are one. Unicellular organism like bacteria, DNA exists as a single loop or chromosome in the cytoplasm. So, ang mga unicellular organisms, they only consist of one cell. Isa lang ilahang cell. So, ang cell nila, o sila mismong organism, as one na, kibali sagol na ang organism, and then inside the organism, naa dito iyahang cell. Wherein, iyahang cell, type of cell niya is simple, dili complex. So, example again are those of the bacteria. So, ang mga bacteria, they only consist of or composed of one cell. So, ang tawag sa ilaha is what we call unicellular organisms. Now, on the other hand, multicellular organisms, the cell is integrated for proper functioning of body parts and starts with a single cell that divides repeatedly to form a body. Their DNA is enclosed in a membrane known as the nucleus. So by the definition itself, we can say that we are multicellular organisms because ato ang cell kay mag-divide man siya, mudaghan. Take note again na mention ako sa sexual reproduction that egg cell plus the sperm cell forms the zygote, and then si zygote dayon a single cell mag-divide na siya until maka-form of body. So that is for the multicellular organism. So take note again, we are multicellular organisms because we are composed of many cells. Because again, our cells divide. Mao na nga mudaghan siya. But on the other hand, katong mga organisms such as bacteria or specifically microorganisms, gitawag sila og unicellular because they only composed only of one cell. Now, since we are talking about also sexual reproduction, we also have this asexual reproduction. So we know already that multicellular organisms undergo sexual reproduction. So I have mentioned already that the egg from the mother fertilized by a sperm cell from the father or from male to form a zygote as to reproduce a new organism. So there is what we call as ang cells are with hereditary information from both parents. So take note, ang cell na siya DNA, deoxyribonucleic acids nga nagdala sa genes wherein ang genes again naa dito ang traits or ang mga mamana nato from our parents. So pag mag-divide ang cell, ang zygote, mapasa pud tong DNA. So that is sexual reproduction type. But if there is no union of a sperm cell and an egg cell, that is what we call asexual reproduction. So wherein the cells copy their DNA and split, so all new cells are identical. So naagihapoy mapasa nga DNA but identical or exactly the same from the parents. But kita in sexual reproduction mag-differ siya. So naay mga traits, for example, from your father nga dominant sa imuha or naay mga traits sa imuhang mother nga nakuha nimo. So, vice versa. So, depende siya. But for asexual reproduction, ang pag-divide or makuha sa offspring or bata or organism, new organism is the same or exact copy sa DNA gikan sa parent. So, walay union or in asexual reproduction, pwede makareproduce ang single parent. Isa lang nga parent, pwede siya makareproduce of a new organism. But with sexual reproduction, there is a male and a female. Now, let's proceed with the types of cells. So types of cells, we have two, prokaryotic cells and we have eukaryotic cells. Now, from the figure, we can observe that the eukaryotic cells, if lantaw ninyo, are more complex or mas daghan siya og parts or organelles compared to that of the prokaryotic cells, right? Now, what is the difference between these two types of cells? And another question is, man nga klase nga cell tabilong ana? Are we eukaryotic type of cells or prokaryotic types of cells? So let's describe each of the type of cells. Start with the prokaryotic cells. Now, the prokaryotic cell, the DNA within a cell is not separated from the cytoplasm. Again, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. Kay naa siya within the cell. Wala siya naka-enclosed in a nucleus. So, ang cytoplasm of the prokaryotic cell, naa dito ang DNA. So, this type of cells, wala siya'y nuclear membrane or wala siya'y covering. Take note again, wala man siya, ang DNA wala nakabutang sa nucleus. So meaning, wala siya'y nuclear membrane. Therefore, nakascatter lang ang iyahang DNA inside the cell or the cytoplasm. So what are examples of prokaryotic cells? So again, those cells, type of cells, sa mga bacteria or other microorganisms. So take note again, prokaryotic cells, their type of cells is simple, meaning there is no nucleus, walay nucleus ang prokaryotic cells. That is why wala sila'y nuclear membrane. And then, some of the organelles or parts of cells nga naa sa eukaryotic, wala ang prokaryotic cells. And then, ang DNA again is nakabutang lang siya sa cytoplasm or the space of the cell. Wala siya naka-enclose. So, that is for prokaryotic. Let's proceed with the eukaryotic type of cells. So, again, the eukaryotic type of cells are more complex than that of the prokaryotic cells. If you're going to look at the figure, daghan iyahang mga parts. So therefore, the eukaryotic cells do have a nucleus, na siya nucleus, or a nuclear membrane. So since na siya nucleus, naa sa sulod sa nucleus ang iyahang DNA. And then, the eukaryotic cells composes of many parts or organelles. So, what are the examples of organisms nga eukaryotic type of cells sila? So, specifically, we have the animal cells or the plant cells, or the animals and the plants. So, therefore, since we, human as an animal, so ang atoang type of cells nato is what we call as eukaryotic cells. Again, types of cell, we have prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are those of the bacteria or mostly microorganisms. Simple type of cells lang siya. Wala siya'y nucleus, wala siya'y nuclear membrane. While ang eukaryotic cells, mas complex siya, kay daghan siya og mga parts. And then, ang eukaryotic cells, mostly kay sa mga animals and plants. Naa siya'y nucleus, wherein ang sulod sa nucleus dito ang DNA or deoxyribonucleic acids. Take note again, DNA or deoxyribonucleic acids, naa dito ang genes or wherein ang genes maunay nagdala sa traits nga mapasa nato or mapasa sa ato ang mga parents sa atoa as the cell divides. Now, let us explore each of the parts of a cell. So we have cell organelles and their functions. So what are those organelles or parts or sulod sa cell? So kabalo na ta what are the types of cells. We have prokaryotic ba na siya or eukaryotic. So atong i-explore ang sulod sa cell. Unsa may mga naa sa cell. So basically ato ang i-focus is a eukaryotic type of cell. And also we will describe their functions. Start, we have the plasma membrane. Now this plasma membrane, if you're going to look at an anatomy of a cell or structure of a cell, you can see that the plasma membrane is the outer part of the cell. So that is why the function of the plasma membrane is they serve as a complex barrier or a wall. They serve as a protection, separating the cell from its external environment and regulates what passes into and out of the cell. So, bali ang plasma membrane serve na siya as para siya og wall or covering that siya ang mag-monitor kung unsa ang mo sulod or mogawas sa cell. So siya ang kibali barrier in between sulod sa cell o gawas sa cell. And then if we're going to look at the structure of a cell membrane, naa siya'y lipid bilayer. So it is made up of lipids. So gitawag na siya og phospholipids. Wherein na ay mga naka-attach sa iyaha nga mga proteins. So natay transport proteins, napoy mga carbohydrate chains. So unsa may trabaho aning mga proteins. So bali kung sa ato ang campus, we have the guard house. So na dito ang mga guards, right? So bali katong mga guards, sila bali ang mga proteins. Kay sila may mo first nga mo monitor or sila'y mo kuan kung unsay mosulod o mugawas sa ato ang gate. So therefore, kani pong si plasma membrane mura siya og kanang compound or wall nato sa eskwelahan para naka-separate ta sa gawas or sa ato ang community. So ang mga proteins mo na sila ang mga guards. Sila ang mo monitor or mo regulate. So that is the function of the plasma membrane. So serve as a complex barrier. Next, we have the cytoplasm. So if ang plasma membrane again is the compound or the wall nato, for example, sa school with the guard house and the guards as the proteins, ang ground nato or the space nato where the buildings where kita naglakaw or naa is what we called as or the same as the cytoplasm of the cell. So meaning the cytoplasm, it fills the cell and the cellular organelles except the nucleus. So makita nato from the structure that kanang naka in color blue, mao na siya ang cytoplasm, the space. So siya ang kibali space or area nga dito nakabutang ang mga organelles or other parts of the cell except the nucleus. Kasi nucleus naa siya kaugalingong space. So ang cytoplasm naa siya fluid portion or naa siya portion nga fluid gitawag nato og cytosol. So ang cytosol, it is made up of water, mga salt, organic molecules, enzymes, and other materials nga kinahanglan sa cell. Now, if we talk about the difference between the cytoplasm sa animal cell o sa plant cell, ang cytoplasm sa animal cell mas dako iyahang space than that of the plant cells because ang plant cells later natay gitawag og vacuoles. So mao na nga ang vacuoles naa sa plant cells, so maong gamay ang space of the cytoplasm of a plant cell. So again, cytoplasm serve as the space or the area where ang mga other organelles are located or situated. Siya ang mag-hold, maggunit sa mga other organelles. Next, after cytoplasm, we have the nucleus. So if you're going to look at a cell, ang pinakauna gyud nimo ma-observe is the center part or the central part, right? Now, in the central part, there is what we called as the nucleus. So the nucleus is the most prominent, or iyahang function is that it contains DNA, as I have discussed it a while ago, that sulod sa sulod sa nucleus naa dito ang DNA. And again, unsay naa sa DNA? Genes. Unsa man ng genes? Those nga nag-hold sa tuang mga traits or traits from our parents nga mapasa sa tua. So, maong importante si nucleus because naa sa iyaha ang DNA. So, kung mag-divide ang cell, ang DNA mapasa pod sa another cell. So, si nucleus serve also as the control center or the brain of the cell. So, kung again, ang plasma membrane is the walls atohang eskwelahan with the guardhouse, cytoplasm is ang atoang space or ground nato kinsa ka atoang nucleus. So we can say that Dr. Ati, since siya ato ang campus head, so Dr. Ati will serve as the nucleus. So mao na ang function of the nucleus, the brain. Siya ang naay control sa mga other parts. Siya ang mag-monitor. Next, after the nucleus, we have the mitochondria. Now, this mitochondria is the site or the location for chemical reaction that transfer energy from organic compounds. So, na-discuss na nato ning organic compounds to ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, or this ATP or adenosine triphosphate is the energy currency of the body. So therefore, mitochondria serve as the powerhouse of the cell. Meaning, powerhouse of the cell, sa iyaha ma-produce ang energy or siya ang tig-produce og energy nga kinahanglan sa cell. Unsa man to nga energy nga kinahanglan sa cell? So we have this again, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So, unsaon man pag-process sa ATP? So, again, maunay trabaho ni mitochondria. Mo-undergo siya og chemical reaction. Nga i-transfer niya itong mga materials or mga organic compounds, himuon niya og energy, which is the ATP again. Maong gitawag siya og powerhouse of the cell. So, for example, again, in our campus, we can say that the mitochondria sa atuang campus or eskwelahan is we have in the new admin building or sa administration building. Kay, take note, in the administration building na dito ang accounting office, budgeting office, na dito ang office sa campus head, na dito ang registrar, tanan nga mga functions or processes as a whole sa ato ang school dito mahitabo. So dito ma-produce ang energy. So just like ato ang cell, we have this mitochondria. Next, in the cell, there is also what we called as ribosomes. Now, ribosomes are the most numerous organelles of the cell. Most numerous meaning sila ang pinaka daghan, but in terms of size, they are small or smaller in size, and their function is they are the site or the location for protein synthesis, or meaning sila ang tig-produce og protein. Now, protein is needed in the cell para to produce the DNA. So, take note again kung unsa ka-importante ang DNA. So, kinahanglan siya. So, one of the material nga kinahanglan para makaproduce or makabuhat og DNA is we have protein. So, kinsa may mag-produce og protein? So, maunay trabaho sa mga ribosomes. Now, ribosomes, some of them are free in the cytoplasm or nakascatter lang sila sa cytoplasm or the space of the cell. So, gitawag na sila og free ribosomes. Naapoy mga ribosomes nga nag-attach sila sa endoplasmic reticulum, and that is what we called bound ribosomes. So, ang mga ribosomes na sila'y it is composes of a large subunit and a small subunit. Attached together na sila. So, take note again, ribosomes, they are the one who produces protein. So, naatay free ribosomes, naapotay bound ribosomes. So, siguro we can say that ribosomes are, for example, mga buildings nato or each department of the school or the staff. So, pwede sila. Pwede nato magparihas og role or function of the ribosomes. Next, after ribosome, we have the endoplasmic reticulum. Now, endoplasmic reticulum, if you're going to look at the structure, so naatay types of endoplasmic reticulum depending on the attachment of ribosomes. So na-mention nato to gaina that na mga ribosomes nga gitawag nato og bound ribosomes. So katong mga ribosomes nga mo attach sa endoplasmic reticulum, ang tawag sa endoplasmic reticulum is what we called as the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now those or endoplasmic reticulum nga walay naka-attach nga ribosomes, they are what we called as smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So therefore, naatay gitawag og rough endoplasmic reticulum, napatay gitawag og smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Now, the question is, what is the function or role sa endoplasmic reticulum sa cell? So, ilahang function is to transport material. So, sila ang mag-deliver, mo transfer. So, kibali kung sa school, ang ato ang mga vehicles or mga cars nga needed siya para makatransport ta og mga materials from one agency to another or one place to another, mautoy mga endoplasmic reticulum. So take note again, endoplasmic reticulum are those organelle of the cell that used to transport materials. So sila ang mo-transport of materials. Next, we have the Golgi apparatus or Golgi body. So this Golgi apparatus or Golgi apparatus, they works closely with the endoplasmic reticulum. So sila ang partner ni endoplasmic reticulum. Take note again unsa ang function sa endoplasmic reticulum. They are the one who transports materials. So unsa pay trabaho ni Golgi apparatus? Modify sa mga proteins for export by the cell. Meaning, iyahang gina-check or gina-package, gina-modify niya ang mga proteins or materials nga okay na for export. So ang magdala ato again is we have endoplasmic reticulum, diba? Endoplasmic reticulum transports the materials. So, i-check daan ni Golgi apparatus, iyang i-modify, i-package niya, and then, siya ang muingon nga ready for export na ang mga materials. Now, next, we have the vacuoles. So, vacuoles, usually, mas makita sila sa mga plant cells. And then in the plant cells, they are larger in size. In animal cells, wala kayo mga vacuoles. So the purpose of the vacuoles, if you're going to look at the figure of a plant cell, the organelle which is larger in size, kanang naay light green ang color niya, mao na ang vacuole. So vacuole, they serve as a storage or pundohanan of water, sugars, salts, pigments, and toxic substances to protect plants from herbivores. So pundohanan or storage area ang vacuole. So for example, in the school, we do have mga storage area or kuan nato. So mao po toy marag same function of the vacuoles. Next, after the vacuoles, we have the lysosomes. So lysosomes contains digestive enzymes for intercellular and extracellular breakdown of materials such as proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, and phospholipids. Kani si lysosomes, since naa siya'y digestive enzymes, when we talk about enzymes, they speeds up reaction. Sila ang magpadali sa mga reactions. Manay trabaho sa enzymes. Enzymes are special type of proteins. enzymes, mga proteins na sila nga ilahang special function nila is mapapaspas nila ang mga reaction or processes. So since lysosome naa siya'y digestive enzymes. So si lysosome naa siya'y ability to digest or break down mga materials nga dili na kinahanglan sa cell nga pwede niya ma-recycle. So that is the function of the lysosomes. Next, after the lysosomes, we have cilia and flagella. Now, these two organelles or structure of the cell, they are hair-like organelles that extend from the surface of the cell where they assist in movement. So meaning ilahang function, this two is for the movement of the cell, para makamove ang cell. So if you're going to look at the figure, the difference between the two is that for the flagellum, makita nato one good example of human cell nga naay flagellum is we have the sperm cell of the male. So ang tail kibali sa sperm cell, iyahang ikog mo gitawag nato og flagellum. So that is why during sexual reproduction, 'di ba, ang mga sperm cells, they are in great amount nga kinahanglan nila mo move to fertilize an egg cell of a female. So in order for them to move or swim, naa sila'y what we called as flagellum or tail. So again, the flagellum serve as mo-assist siya sa movement of a cell. So if you're going to look at iyang structure kay long, taas, and then usually single or singular or isa lang. But on the other hand, if you look at the structure of the cilia, they are short, but they are many or daghan sila. So they are somewhat hair-like projections or mga buhok nga nag-project. So sila ang move na sila para ang cell makamove pod. So that is the function of the cilia and the flagella for movement or mo-assist sila for the motion of the cell. Next, aside from the cilia and flagella, we have also this cell wall. This cell wall usually kay naa lang siya sa mga plant cells. Walay cell wall ang animal cells. But take note that animal cells naa sila'y plasma membrane or cell membrane. So ang plant cells naapod sila'y plasma membrane or cell membrane, but naa sila'y ikadubli nga support or protection nga gitawag nato og cell wall. So ang mga plant cell naa na sila'y cell wall, naapod sila'y plasma membrane. So duha ilahang covering. So that is why ang mga plant cells are more rigid or mas definite ilahang shape. So again, the cell wall is found only in plant cell and in some fungi. So it helps support and protect the plant cells. The same sa function sa plasma membrane nga mo serve as a barrier or protection or mo regulates unsay mosulod og mogawa sa cell, mao pod na ang the same function sa cell wall. So ang sa mga plant cells, duha lang ilahang double wall ang ilahang kay naa naman sila'y plasma membrane, napod sila'y cell wall. Ang mga animal cells, plasma membrane lang ang naa, wala sila'y cell wall. Next, we have chloroplast. So this chloroplast, the same with the cell wall, makita ra pud ning chloroplast sa mga plant cells. So kitang sa tuang type of cells nato or animal cells, wala tay chloroplast. Now why? Why do plant cells lang ang naay mga chloroplasts? Unsa day function sa chloroplasts? So chloroplasts are plastid that contains the green pigment chlorophyll. So a type of plastid ay ning chloroplast wherein naa sila'y mga ginaproduce or naay sulod sa ilaha nga mga pigment. So specifically kaning chloroplast, siya ang nag-contain sa green pigment, which is the chlorophyll. Now, this chlorophyll is very important in the process of photosynthesis. So, siguro you know already what is photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis is very important for the production of food sa mga plants. Take note, ang mga plants, they are what we call as self-feeders or autotrophs. So, para makaproduce, they can produce their own food. So, ang process ato is gitawag nato og photosynthesis. So, kaning chloroplast, kinahanglan siya sa process of photosynthesis kay inside sa chloroplast na ang chlorophyll. Ang chlorophyll, green pigment, mao na ang mo absorb sa energy coming from the sun. Mo nang importante sila. So, if you're going to look at the figure of a chloroplast, na siya yung mga parts, the inner membrane, outer membrane, stroma, thylakoid, granum, and then we have lamella. Now, there are also mga organelles of the cells nga wala na mention diri, but to elaborate it detailed gyud, naa pay mga other nga mga minor organelles of the cells. Now, in your manual or in our CBP science manual, the organelles of the cells are described further. So, nakabutang dito gi-describe yun further. So, this video lecture are just summarized, and then ako lang additional information aside from the CBP Science Manual. And also, there are videos that would serve also as a reference for our lecture. So, please try to watch those videos that I'm going to share in our page, and also I will share the links in our group chat. So I think that's for the organelles of the cells or the parts of the cells for this chapter 5 part 2. So again, we discussed about the early scientists who introduces the cell. We have types of cells. We have lastly the organelles or the parts of cells with their functions. So again, if naay mga clarifications or questions, you can just message me or PM me at the group in our group chat. So thank you and God bless. Once again, good day to all of you.